breathing. You saved his life. Who are you?
I'm Dr. Sean Murphy. I'm a surgical resident at San Jose St. Bonaventure Hospital.
He sees things and analyzes things in ways that we can't even begin to understand.
Again? Again? There.
Looks normal to me.
It's not normal.
This kid was sprayed with glass shards. What if a piece of glass entered his bloodstream? Blood could be leaking behind the heart.
You were right.
Never forget, you're the smart one. You can do anything.
Hello and welcome to another episode of ERG PowerTalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That clip we just watched is from the 2017 TV medical drama series, The Good Doctor, starring Freddie Highmore as Dr. Sean Murphy, an exceptional doctor whose abilities are enhanced by his unique perspectives resulting from having autism and savant syndrome. The series was one of many programs in recent years that highlight the important contributions of neurodivergent individuals. Neurodiversity encompasses a wide range of neurological differences present in the human population. These include conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and others. Neurodivergence brings valuable perspectives and cognitive styles to the workplace that can foster innovation, problem solving, and creativity. Individuals who are neurodivergent may have strengths in areas such as pattern recognition, attention to detail, and novel ways of thinking. Neurodivergence is more prevalent than some may think it is. Estimates vary, but studies suggest that neurodivergent individuals make up a significant portion of the world population, with some suggesting that up to 15 to 20% of people worldwide may be considered neurodivergent. Unfortunately, society suppresses neurodivergence through stigma, discriminating stereotypes, limited accessibility to accommodations in education and employment, sometimes bullying and inflexible social norms. And this hinders the inclusion of valuable perspectives and cognitive styles in our groups and workplaces, diminishing our potential for innovative problem solving and creativity. So how can you as an ERG leader support the neurodivergent individuals in your group as well as in your organization so that they can fully contribute all they have to give? That's the topic of our discussion for today. And to help us answer this and other key questions, we've got the perfect guest. But before we introduce our guest, let's take a moment to review our mission and acknowledge our supporters. This is ERG PowerTalk, and I'm your host, Joe Santana. ERG PowerTalk is your 21st century virtual forum for the exchange of great ideas and inspiration for ERG leaders, as well as others interested in supporting ERGs. With ERG PowerTalk, there is no more waiting until the next conference and praying that you get the budget to travel to the conference to find great ideas and stimulation. Just subscribe and listen to thought leaders at your convenience. Before we begin, a quick note of thanks to our supporters: Elastic, Dollar General, Freighter Health and Wisconsin Medical College, Hiscox, Mass Mutual, Manpower Group, Tapestry, Federal Reserve System, Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, MIT Lincoln Laboratory, Oshkosh Corporation, UL Solutions, and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Now, let's go straight to the program. As the Chief Technology Officer at Mentra, he is at the forefront of reshaping the future workforce. With a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in information science from Cornell University, his expertise in this subject matter is unparalleled. As a dedicated advocate for neurodiversity and a passionate speaker at the Association for Autism and Neurodiversity, he empowers organizations to foster inclusivity and unlock the untapped potential of individuals worldwide.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shea Belsky. I am Chief Technology Officer at Mentra. Mentra is a hiring platform for neurodivergent job seekers everywhere. I myself am an autistic self-advocate, diagnosed with autism at a pretty young age, And now I leverage my autism as an amazing attribute and trait to change the world of neurodivergent individuals, bring awareness to our needs, support needs, and accommodations, and really how you can unlock the fullest potential of neurodivergent individuals around the world.
Shea, thank you for joining us here on ERG Power Talk. I really appreciate having you here. I've actually heard you speak before on other programs, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you here today. So tell us a little bit about your current role and a little more about that involvement that you have with neurodiversity. You just started talking about that a little bit, but expand on it a little more.
Of course. My role at Mentra is Chief Technology Officer. I've been with Mentra for about 2 years right now. Mentra was funded a few years ago by Sam Altman, the big guy, Sam Altman from ChatGPT and OpenAI. And we've really been focused on building out a hiring platform for job seekers, for employers, and service providers to come together and help understand how to really find meaningful employment opportunities for neurodivergent individuals. Something you mentioned was the incidence or how many people in the world are neurodivergent. I think the numbers that I hear are about 1 in 7 people around the world are neurodivergent. But of that 1 in 7, up to 30 to 40% of them are either unemployed or underemployed, which means that they're not using the skill set which they are passionate about, that they learned in school or training, and are not able to use the fullest potential of their minds, of their skill sets in a workplace that can truly harness them. And what Mentra is aiming to do is look at a neurodivergent individual for everything that they are, not just their strengths, but also including any of their needs, of their support needs. So often is the case that neurodivergent individuals are only seen for a deficit-based lens or only from a purely strength-based lens. We look at both to make sure that neurodivergent job seekers have what they need to succeed in a workplace that will allow them to apply their skill sets to the fullest extent possible.
A friend of the show, he's a researcher, and he recently completed a paper on neurodivergence along with a co-author. And the quotation that you just cited, where you mentioned about neurodivergent people being underemployed, was there as well. And it was really stunning when I saw that. And given some of the people that we've learned about, like, for example, Temple Grandin and others who have contributed so much, and primarily because of being neurodivergent, it sounds like corporations are really missing out on a huge treasure trove of talent and capability as a result of perhaps a combination of just biases and lack of understanding. My question for you is, what are some of the common misconceptions about neurodiverse individuals?
The biggest thing that I encounter is kind of a grouping or broad categorization of neurodivergent individuals based on sharing a diagnosis or looking or behaving like somebody that they already know. For instance, we just saw a little clip from The Good Doctor. I'm going to be honest and say I haven't watched the show. I do know of other shows out there in the world which feature neurodivergent or autistic individuals as 2 common examples. The problem with those shows and with other companies is that they kind of say, oh, every autistic individual behaves the same way, so we all have to treat them the same way. Same for people with ADHD, dyslexia, so on and so forth. And that becomes a challenge when you have 2 very different neurodivergent individuals who have 2 very different sets of needs, of supports, of strengths. And grouping them all together and saying these 2 people share a medical diagnosis and therefore must behave in the same way is a very harmful stereotype. It introduces a lot more problems than it attempts to solve. And as a result, we see a lot of people struggle when people who are on the purposes to create accommodations or create support kind of lump them together and don't have a more thorough conversation, don't seek to understand, like you said, what's going on, and have a more full, authentic conversation about someone's needs and what their strengths are.
I'm thinking that seems to be like a common problem, I guess, that organizations face with people neurodivergent and everyone else, is that in order to be able to mass address these different types of opportunities or challenges that are happening among different types of people, they try to group people together into this particular category. And this is the neurodivergent category. And there's a lot of variety within those there are multiple spectrums so that people can have certain qualities that are manifested more strongly in one way than in another, or qualities that are present in one person who they think belongs to one of these big categories that's totally absent from somebody else that they're lumping into the same categories. And that seems to be a big challenge. It sounds almost like in order for organizations to really get the best out of the different people that they have in an organization, they have to almost move away from that one size fits all or that lumping together and begin to deal with people as individuals, right?
I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and add on to something you just said about taking it one step further about creating neuro-inclusion, the idea of a spectrum, and something which has come up time and time again, saying, oh, they're on a spectrum or they're on something. The idea about neurodiversity being on a spectrum is of itself kind of a limiting factor to creating inclusion in a workplace, because a spectrum, to be honest with you, is kind of a relative observation of someone being very autistic or not autistic at all, whatever that means. You and I are having this conversation. I identify as being autistic for sure, but who is to say if I am very autistic or not? It is a very relative thing. It depends on whatever someone perceives as being my greatest strengths or my greatest weaknesses. For me, I struggle with sensory stuff, with a lot of sound, a lot of light. I have a very tightly controlled environment for my senses. But when that is controlled for, then I do a great job and I can really kick butt and take over the world if I really felt like it. And what happens is that when you do work with somebody who maybe has a lot more support needs, who has a lot of great strengths, a lot of great talents, attributes to bring to life, to a workplace, but they also need a lot of support to get those things, then simply saying, oh, they're on one end of the spectrum or another is a limiting factor. And companies miss out on that simply by kind of sweeping them off to one end or the other. Really, a much more objective and more authentic measure or representation of someone's neurodiversity is more of a color wheel when you get to represent, okay, me as an individual, I'm great at communication, executive functioning, and motor skills, but I struggle with social stuff sometimes. I struggle with sensory stuff a lot of the times. And those are the things that I struggle with as an individual. And it is a visual representation. You don't have to take it literally, but it helps to visualize it in your head to not put somebody into a bucket, like you said before, to categorize somebody simply because they struggle with one thing, which one thing considers to be a problem, but someone else maybe isn't an issue at all. It depends a lot on the job too. For instance, you could work in an environment which involves a lot of talking, a lot of being on the phone, maybe being on calls, video calls, meetings, whatever. And in a situation, if somebody who's neurodivergent struggles with keeping up with all their meetings, maybe they struggle to remember when things are or take notes, then maybe their neurodiversity is more profound and they need more support to work through the day. But once they have that support, whether it's an executive functioning coach, whether it's a more rigid and structured calendar, whether it's reminders, then they can go in there and ace every one of their meetings. They'll be an extremely important member of the conversations, of being present and being there, just having some additional support and guardrails to get there.
So Shea, what are some ways that leveraging neurodiversity in an organization, doing it properly, contributes to innovation and problem solving within that organization?
The companies are missing out on. Without having the ability to support their employees in the way that they need to be supported as individuals, they're missing out on unlocking the intelligence, the passion, the energy that folks bring into the room. Because if they don't have the support that they need, things can fall off the rails and goes who knows any number of ways. And it creates a lot more stress than it solves to simply say, these are the limits of the accommodations and supports that we can provide, and we can't do anything more. But instead to work with the individual and say, what can we do to ensure that you have the ability to work as much as efficiently and effectively as possible? That's when you're going to start to unlock all of their talent to reduce stress that they feel and really get them going.
You answered my next question, and I think I got a better picture from you about this, because that's why you talked about in the beginning, understanding both the needs as well as the capabilities, because you need to balance both. And I love that idea of that wheel. I've seen that used before for other things. Was that something that you were talking about metaphorically in order to explain this? Or is that something you actually use, that you have a physical product that has that wheel on it that can be used to make that assessment that you just made before?
It is a metaphor. It certainly can be a physical thing in the world if it helps to describe it to somebody better. If maybe someone's support needs are more profound, I'm not going to prescribe making a physical product out of that, but I certainly don't see the harm in it if used meaningfully and respectfully. I think the metaphor is more important to get away from the idea that two people who both are autistic, who have a different set of support needs, are both on the same end of a spectrum. They're either one end or the other, whatever that means, but rather instead their supports, their needs, and then also their strengths are more objectively and genuinely represented. That way it's easier for them to be able to articulate, to advocate for themselves and say, hey, I'm great at communicating, but I need help figuring out how to use public transportation or to plan my day out. But when I have help doing those things, then I can get to work and have an amazing work day, or I can go to school and have an amazing school day. Whatever it is meant to provide agency to allow someone to advocate for themselves a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great. That's insightful, because the spectrum is very linear. And what you're talking about is more multidimensional. Okay, here is what I got from the first half of our discussion with Shea. 1, misconceptions about neurodiverse individuals often stem from stereotyping and generalizations, leading to harmful biases and misunderstandings. Moving away from these stereotypes and engaging in authentic conversations about individual strengths and needs is crucial for moving forward. 2, unlike the way they are characterized in movies and TV, neurodivergent individuals are not all the same based on diagnosis, like, for example, autism. Each individual brings unique strengths and support needs. To develop environments where neurodivergent individuals can contribute most of their capabilities and thrive, it's essential to recognize them as individuals rather than grouping them together based solely on a diagnosis or perceived similarities. 3, instead of viewing neurodiversity as a linear spectrum, embracing a more multidimensional approach allows a better understanding of individual capabilities and support requirements. This approach fosters neuro-inclusion, where individuals are valued for their unique contributions and supported in fulfilling their unique potential. 4, by providing tailored support and accommodations for individuals, organizations can unlock the intelligence, passion, and energy of neurodivergent individuals, leading to increased innovation and problem-solving capabilities within the workplace. And finally, 5, the key to success is empowering neurodivergent individuals to advocate for themselves and articulate their strengths and support needs. Listening is crucial in this area for fostering a supportive and inclusive environment. This can help individuals better understand and communicate their unique attributes, promoting agency and self-advocacy. In the next segment of our discussion with Shea, we will go deeper into specific ways organizations can get more out of neurodivergent individuals and what your ERGs can do to help. All this and more when we return, but first this. I'll see you on the other side. Are you an ERG group or committee chair struggling to balance your ERG activities with your day job responsibilities? Well, you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of passionate ERG leads all around the world that find themselves in the same boat. The only solution found by many is to give up lunch hours and personal time with family and friends. But there is a better way, and that better way is to master the powerful skills that enable you to 1, set realistic and achievable compelling goals and priorities. 2, distribute the workload by effectively delegating tasks and responsibilities to others. 3, communicate in a way that increases your impact with less time and effort on your part. 4, Secure the full and active support of executive sponsors and other senior business leaders. And 5, fit your ERG leadership work into a reasonable set of time boundaries. And that and more is exactly what tens of thousands of your colleagues have learned to do effortlessly by participating in Supercharge Workshops. Supercharge Workshops was developed by us along the same easy and powerful how-to framework found in our popular Supercharge Your ERG's book. The modular, customizable programs are loaded with fun exercises and tools that will immediately give you back hours of time each day while increasing your ability to achieve high impact and measurable results in both your ERG work and your job. For more details on how you can schedule a Supercharge Workshop session in your organization, go to superchargeworkshops.com. That's https:// Workshops, one word with no spaces.com. So don't suffer silently. Take that first step towards stopping your struggle today. Check out Supercharge Workshops. So what are some specific strategies that you can share where organizations have done this right and it's worked well in terms of being able to really fully leverage a neurodiverse employee in the workplace?
At the root of it comes down to creating a safe space, or a brave space that I heard recently, which enables people to be authentic, to be honest with each other and with themselves regarding neurodiversity. What often happens is that you have neurodivergent folks who want to say something, who want to talk about their needs, but don't feel as though there are people around them who they can confide in or trust to share this information with in a way that will be respected and taken seriously. They may have trauma or PTSD from previous times when they were honest and authentic and were shamed, fired, or worse because of it, and maybe don't want to talk about it ever again. On the one hand, if somebody is never going to talk about it, you can't force them to, you can't make them to, if they genuinely don't have the courage to do so. On the other hand, what I've seen work out really effectively is companies being very forward and open about saying, if you require any support, if you have anything that you think could help you do your work better, the door is open. I'm sticking a hand through. Feel free to grab it if you want to come talk, and then we'll have a conversation. And I think companies being forward and open about their desire, their willingness, their forward momentum to work with individuals and employees on how to create a supportive environment has worked out very well. Because then that motivates neurodivergent people to say, okay, this company is being very forward and honest that they want to work with me. I have seen from people around me that they've gotten similar support too. Let me give this a try to see what I can do to create a more productive environment for myself.
Got it. So a lot of our listeners are members or leaders of employee resource groups within organizations. What are some of the things that they can do in terms of providing support for neurodiversity in two spheres? One, within their community, because they might have within their particular community group, women's group, vets group, there might be people that are neurodivergent there, and within the organization writ large. So in those two spheres, what are some of the things that you feel that these groups can do to surface and support neurodiversity in their communities?
ERGs are really special places where folks from similar backgrounds and even allies of those backgrounds come together to have conversations, to feel empathy, to express empathy or sympathy, and to feel like they are heard and understood. It is a extremely high environment where that emotional safety typically exists, whether it's ERG for women, people of color, or in this case, disability or neurodiversity. At a couple of my previous employers, I was a member of disability or neurodiversity ERGs. And in those environments, I genuinely felt the support and structure that I needed to feel like people around me heard me. If ERG leaders were going to cultivate that and grow that, one thing that I think could be very helpful is kind of a finding your voice, finding yourself advocate workshop or event where people can come together to try to understand what about the current working place is working and what is not working. Something that I felt that I struggled with personally, and I know so many other neurodivergent folks struggle with too, is being able to articulate and communicate, what are my needs? What do I need to be successful? Because what happens often is that you'll have employees who come up to their manager and say, Mr. and Mrs. Manager, I have dyslexia. End of sentence. And as helpful as it is for a manager to know they have dyslexia, that can mean any number of different things. And it kind of leaves a lot to the imagination of the manager to then pick something and do with that information. What I've seen happen at previous ERGs in the past is helping people kind of sharpen their elevator pitch, if you want to call it that, sharpen their voice about what do they need to be successful, and then subsequently, what does that enable them to do? What are they really good at, but what is getting in the way of them getting to that kind of finish line where they are able to accomplish what they are most capable of? And I've been through a couple of these myself, and I've definitely found that understanding, kind of looking inward to see what is and isn't working, has been super helpful for me to understand who I am as an individual and what I need from my team, from my manager, from my company, whoever it is at the time. I think to answer your second question was regarding what they can do to kind of impact the rest of the company once this information is kind of in place. And I've also been on those sorts of meetings as well. I was an ERG leader in a previous organization. And in my capacity there, I did have a couple conversations with senior administration or other high-ranking people in the company to help explain to them our concerns or ideas or suggestions that people had from those meetings and other meetings to say, this is what's coming up for us. This is why it's a problem. What can we do to achieve what we want, or a middle ground at worst case scenario? It's been very helpful for us to have an ear with leadership, be it an executive sponsor, through someone who has our back as an advocate, or somebody who understands what we're going through. At another company that I was at, the disability ERG that was there, their executive sponsor was somebody with disability. And that provided a large amount of credibility to the organization and to other people looking to create meaningful change on the subject of disability within the organization. So I would say having those conversations with leadership, and to the best of your ability, finding those leaders who have disabilities or are neurodivergent and can meaningfully advocate for them and represent their needs is another huge step in the right direction.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, we were talking again about how organizations sometimes bundle different things together under one particular umbrella. And this whole idea of neurodivergence being bucketed together with disability, there might be pluses and minuses to that. I'm thinking, because neurodivergence sounds like it's such a broad topic in itself. It sounds like it could be a standalone group. Not that we want to keep multiplying ERGs, but in your experience, would you say that neurodivergence is better served perhaps by having an ERG that focuses specifically on that? Or do you think that it's better served by being part of the disability ERG, or maybe some combination thereof?
It's a great question. I think to me that answer depends a little bit on the size and maturity of the organization. For instance, at both of the companies that I've been at previously, at a few of them, there was only a disability community, and then it'd be like a neurodiversity kind of group within the disability ERG. There wasn't enough people, there wasn't a critical mass of people to have it be its own thing, but there was enough people within the disability ERG where they could talk and have conversations. We had like a Slack channel or a group chat or something like that. Now at bigger companies, like tens of thousands of people, maybe you have that critical mass and maybe you have a different but related set of needs where maybe you're not contained within the disability community, but you still partner with them and work with them on a common frequency. It really depends, I would say, on the maturity of the organization, how much their needs differ or are the same as the disability community more broadly, and what they're both looking to gain from having two separate communities. I think the answer really varies based on kind of the size of the company. And I've been through both sizes where both forms of that exist, where there is only disability community and where there's a disability and an ERG community. Sometimes it even gets more specific into just people with autism or just people who have dyslexia. And it really depends a lot on how many people are around to talk about the conversation and where to go from there.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Shea, talk a little more about how ERG leaders and their communities can help to put front and center the importance of leveraging neurodiversity in terms of bringing that to the attention of the corporate leadership, whether they do it by demonstrating how they're doing it within their own group or they do it by some other means. Have there been some examples that you've seen work out well?
What I found has been helpful is at previous companies I've been on, they'll do like a quarterly survey, like a quarterly employee NPS survey. And what a previous ERG of mine did was ask a question about disability in the survey. These surveys are anonymous, so the only thing that they ever know is like the aggregated output of these questions. But it was helpful for the ERG to know how many people were a official member of the ERG and how many employees at this company actually reported themselves as having a disability at all. And that would then allow them to be a little bit more vocal about getting their needs met, about addressing things which they say are problematic, but don't necessarily have specific numbers to put behind it. Let's just say that a disability ERG has 200 people in it, but you have a company which has 1,000 people who say they have a disability in them out of, call it 10,000. That's 10% of your employees. That's a lot of people at a company of 10,000 people. And it puts a lot more emphasis, not necessarily urgency, but more importance on the idea of being inclusive when it comes to people with disabilities or neurodiversity. Again, thinking about big companies where you do have a neurodiversity specific group, a neurodiversity specific ERG. Then let's say you have a company of 20,000 people. And then let's say, again, 500 to 1,000 of them say that they're neurodivergent. That's still a lot of people. That's what, 5% or so? I'm not getting the math right. But it's still a large fraction of your employees who say they're neurodivergent and could benefit from having a group or having someone to advocate for them. And leadership and administration is driven by numbers. And having those numbers available makes a much stronger case for asking for change or asking for improvements to what's going on.
So yeah, collecting information and making sure that information gets to the right ears is certainly something that's very important. Another question I have for you is, in your research and in your work, have you found that there's probably a certain number of the population that may be somewhat neurodivergent in certain areas that is not out there and considered to be neurodivergent?
I would say historically, from my perspective, and this is purely a perspective, that I observe far more undiagnosed people who are neurodivergent than I do diagnosed people. Part of the reason for that is it's expensive to get a diagnosis at any point in your life, but especially as you get older and the access to doctors who are capable of providing a diagnosis as an adult dwindle the older that you get. If you're going to get a diagnosis, it is my understanding that it's far more likely it'll happen when you're younger, like under the age of 10, something like that, rather than when you're past the age of 10. By no means is it impossible. I know people who've gotten diagnosed at their 20s and their 30s and their 40s. It just becomes a lot harder to find the correct medical professional who will do that. It's expensive. It can take a long time. So there are a lot of barriers to taking a diagnosis. And then even when you do get one, part of the conversation is, okay, well, what do I do with this information? Sometimes an employer or sometimes you will be asked for a proof of diagnosis to get access to services or to get access to medication. It really varies based on your set of needs and whether you or not you think that having a diagnosis on paper will be beneficial to you. I do know people who have sought out a diagnosis for the sole purpose of getting everything on brand and getting access to medication that they need, which is only available to them with an official diagnosis. And I know people for whom the medication is very helpful and it helps them get through the day. At the same time, people have been given hard times about saying they're neurodivergent and not have a diagnosis, even though it's objectively obvious to them, but they don't have the insurance coverage or insurances don't cover it most of the time. In that case, you're paying out of pocket. They don't have the cash to pay for a specialist, or the specialist takes a year, 2 years to get to them. There's a lot of barriers to getting a diagnosis. And I would say most people that I know of typically self-diagnose. That's by no means all of them. But I would say that more than half of the neurodivergent people I know are self-diagnosed.
Mm, that's interesting. So, are there any emerging trends or developments in the field of neurodiversity that you believe organizations should be aware of?
Just a few things. Number one, I think something we touched on before was that looking for neurodiversity in other people, especially women, people of color, people of different sexual identities or gender backgrounds, whatever it is. Historically, a lot of the research on autism specifically, not including everyone's neurodiversity, but autism is one that's kind of talked about often. A lot of the research was done on white men. So white men were diagnosed at about an average rate, and in women or people of color, it wasn't diagnosed as often as it should have been. And now, within the last 5 or so years, the science around understanding neurodiversity and autism in women, people of color, people of different backgrounds is getting better. It doesn't mean necessarily that more people are neurodivergent or autistic. It's not growing like COVID would be. Instead, the science and also the social stigma, the willingness of people to seek out a medical professional to get a diagnosis is getting better. More and more people are seeing that it is possible to lead a meaningful life being neurodivergent, whereas maybe 20 years ago, that wasn't always the case. But we're seeing now more and more that it is possible to lead an individual, well-lived, meaningful life while being neurodivergent. And I think that's the biggest change that we're seeing in the medical sense, in the diagnostic sense, of more people having access to or reducing the social barrier to a diagnosis. It's still high, but it is slowly trending in the correct direction.
So, Shea, how can our listeners learn more about neurodiversity? What resources are out there? Papers, videos, information that they can get their hands on?
My company, Mentra, puts that stuff on the subject all the time. We are on all social media platforms, so feel free to find us on your social media platform of choice. I've also done podcasts as well where I've talked about this and different subjects as well. I've talked about how to help neurodivergent people in your personal lives, family lives, and workplace, kind of a little bit of everything. So if you're looking for a different perspective, feel free to listen to other things that I've been on if you're looking for a slightly altered perspective, if you're coming from a different spot. And also there's other organizations out there who focus on different aspects of the workplace or on life. Mentra focuses, for instance, on how to support job seekers, how to support companies and employers by becoming more neuro-inclusive. But let's say that you have a family member or a friend who could benefit from support in their life through life coaching or through executive functioning coaching or therapy or some other sort of personal social support that's kind of outside the scope of a workplace. That is what AANE does really well. That's the Association for Autism and Neurodiversity. They could be found also on any social media platform of your choice. That is AANE if you want to search that on the internet. Mentra and AANE are both really great organizations who always put out so much content on how.
Okay, so here's what I got out of the second part of my discussion with Shea. 1, the best thing an organization can do to get the most out of neurodiverse individuals is to foster authenticity and honesty by creating safe or brave spaces where neurodivergent individuals feel comfortable sharing their needs and experiences without fear of judgment or repercussions. 2, to this end, organizations should be open and proactive about signaling their commitment to providing support and accommodations to neurodivergent individuals. This encourages individuals to seek out the necessary resources to contribute their best and thrive. 3, ERGs can play an essential role by hosting workshops or events focused on helping neurodivergent individuals to articulate their needs and strengths effectively, empowering them to advocate for themselves in the workplace. 4, ERGs can also collect data through confidential employee surveys to demonstrate the prevalence of neurodiversity within the organization. Efforts like this can surface neurodivergent team members who may not belong to one of the ERGs, but should be counted and supported. This data can be instrumental in advocating for changes and improvements to support neurodivergent individuals by showing the potential impact on the company based on the number of neurodivergent individuals in the organization. 5, recognizing the diversity within neurodivergent communities and the number of neurodivergent people that might be in an organization. A disability ERG where neurodivergence is usually housed might consider whether to have a dedicated ERG spin-off, which just focuses on neurodiversity. At a minimum, though, in a small workforce where there may not be enough neurodiversity to support the creation of a separate ERG, the disability ERG can set up a subcommittee to focus on neurodivergence. And finally, 6, this neurodivergent ERG or subcommittee can stay informed about emerging trends and resources in the field of neurodiversity to help the organization better support their neurodivergent employees by partnering with organizations like Shea's company, Mentra, and the Association for Autism and Neurodiversity. Reflecting on my insightful conversation with Shea, it's clear that misconceptions about supporting and leveraging neurodiversity stem from one thing: the generalizations that lead to harmful stereotypes and prevent us from seeing the needs and potential of this large community. To foster an inclusive environment for neurodiversity, we must recognize each individual's unique strengths and support needs, moving away from simplistic bulk grouping categorizations and constructs like spectrums that limit our ability to appreciate neurodivergence's complexity fully. The biggest lesson I learned from all this is that by embracing the authentic complexity of neurodivergence with a mind that's open to learning and providing tailored support, we can unlock the potential of neurodivergent individuals, enabling them to make the most significant contributions and thrive. So I invite you to commit your ERGs to creating those safe spaces and support for neurodivergence, empowering self-advocacy, and helping to drive meaningful change as we work together to build a more inclusive and meaningful future for all.
To support neurodivergent folks in life, in the workplace, and just in general.
Excellent. And what is that website?
That is mentra.com, mentra.com. And then AANE is AANE, I think it's .org. I'll double check, but I'm reasonably certain that AANE.org is their website.
Fantastic. And how can our listeners reach you directly?
I am also on your social media platform of choice. There is only one of me, so if you find me, that is the correct version of me, because there's not another one. And if there is, let me know.
I love that. I had no trouble at all finding you. Once I sat in on one of your panel presentations, I just went very quickly in there and I typed in Shea Belsky, and guess what? There is only one and only Shea Belsky. So that's great. Can't say that for Joe Santana, unfortunately, but that was great. Shea, thank you so much for being on ERG PowerTalk. Really appreciated talking to you and really found it insightful in terms of having a broader understanding of this important topic.
Joseph, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all your listeners, everybody listening, whatever you are. I appreciate you caring about neurodiversity, wanting to learn more, and best of luck to everybody on their journeys on becoming more neuro-inclusive. Thank you so much.
Okay, so here's what I got out of the second part of my discussion with Shea. 1, the best thing an organization can do to get the most out of neurodiverse individuals is to foster authenticity and honesty by creating safe or brave spaces where neurodivergent individuals feel comfortable sharing their needs and experiences without fear of judgment or repercussions. 2, to this end, organizations should be open and proactive about signaling their commitment to providing support and accommodations to neurodivergent individuals. This encourages individuals to seek out the necessary resources to contribute their best and thrive. 3, ERGs can play an essential role by hosting workshops or events focused on helping neurodivergent individuals to articulate their needs and strengths effectively, empowering them to advocate for themselves in the workplace. 4, ERGs can also collect data through confidential employee surveys to demonstrate the prevalence of neurodiversity within the organization. Efforts like this can surface neurodivergent team members who may not belong to one of the ERGs, but should be counted and supported. This data can be instrumental in advocating for changes and improvements to support neurodivergent individuals by showing the potential impact on the company based on the number of neurodivergent individuals in the organization. 5, recognizing the diversity within neurodivergent communities and the number of neurodivergent people that might be in an organization. A disability ERG where neurodivergence is usually housed might consider whether to have a dedicated ERG spin-off, which just focuses on neurodiversity. At a minimum, though, in a small workforce where there may not be enough neurodiversity to support the creation of a separate ERG, the disability ERG can set up a subcommittee to focus on neurodivergence. And finally, 6, this neurodivergent ERG or subcommittee can stay informed about emerging trends and resources in the field of neurodiversity to help the organization better support their neurodivergent employees by partnering with organizations like Shea's company, Mentra, and the Association for Autism and Neurodiversity. Reflecting on my insightful conversation with Shea, it's clear that misconceptions about supporting and leveraging neurodiversity stem from one thing: the generalizations that lead to harmful stereotypes and prevent us from seeing the needs and potential of this large community. To foster an inclusive environment for neurodiversity, we must recognize each individual's unique strengths and support needs, moving away from simplistic bulk grouping categorizations and constructs like spectrums that limit our ability to appreciate neurodivergence's complexity fully. The biggest lesson I learned from all this is that by embracing the authentic complexity of neurodivergence with a mind that's open to learning and providing tailored support, we can unlock the potential of neurodivergent individuals, enabling them to make the most significant contributions and thrive. So I invite you to commit your ERGs to creating those safe spaces and support for neurodivergence, empowering self-advocacy, and helping to drive meaningful change as we work together to build a more inclusive and meaningful future for all. Thank you for tuning in to ERG PowerTalk. If you enjoyed and got value out of this program, please like us and leave a favorable review at your podcast provider's site. Also, invite others to listen to the show. By the way, contact me if you're looking for an ERG symposium keynote or a leader for your strategy workshop, new chair onboarding, and or ERG bootcamp. I can run these for you either in person or in a virtual setting. Also, for more great ideas and tips for your ERGs, get my books, Supercharge Your ERGs, 18 Tips to Power Up Your ERG/BRG Strategy, and the new DEI and ERG Frontier, how you and your efforts can rise and thrive in the new world of constant disruption. Both available on Amazon.com. I'm Joe Santana. Thanks again for tuning in.